today I want to show you how to make a tennis style bracelet. Now this one that I've made with the Spring Splendor treasure bag, little cubes that are in it, it's a little bit big of a profile for to be called a tennis bracelet, but it's still tennis bracelet style. And then I made a true tennis size bracelet also. So I'm going to show you both versions. This one done with the Spring Palette treasure bag, little cubes that are in it, but I also have some in the online store, so you can pick some up if you would like some of those and try this style, or you can try this style with a 4mm cuboid or a 4mm fire polish bead. So I've made both so that you don't feel left out, and like I said, you can get all of these beads in my store anyway, so if you'd like to make them, you can, or you can find something in your stash that will work really well and go from there. So let's go ahead, let's get a little bit closer look of these. I'm going to show you what this one looks like on. This one, it's really pretty. They're both gorgeous, but look at how pretty that is. It's substantial, it feels good. And then this one, of course, very pretty too. And let's go ahead and see what it takes to make these bracelets. Okay, for this project today, we are going to be using some of the beads from the Spring Palette treasure bag, this little cube that we're cuboid shape that we're going to be using. It's like a 6x4, and if you do not have that, I'm also going to be showing you how to use a 4x4 cuboid. So I'll be doing two versions. One will be smaller and one will be a little bit bigger version. I do have some of these on the website, so I will post a link, or I will put a link in the description box beneath the video player if you want some of these. I also have some of the cuboids. Now if you want to use something in your own stash, a 4mm round fire polish bead will work really well for this particular project. A fire polish bead is basically the same shape as these little cuboids. Even though they're called round, they're more oval, so they'll work really well. If you want to use something other than what I'm using, then you can use those. I'm going to be adding to the treasure bag 8/0 and 11/0 seed beads. These are both Toho, and they are Starlight, galvanized permanent finish Starlight in the Toho line. Then I'm going to be using this little bamboo clasp, and I do have some of these on the website too, if you would like some. We're going to be using Fireline this time, and I'm going to use 6-pound Fireline, and I have found that the thermally fused tough works really well. So we're going to be using that, and a size 10 or 12 beading needle will work really well also. So let's go ahead and get our needles threaded with a wingspan of thread. You will need to extend your Fireline during this project, so I will post a link for a video to do that. Also, if you do not know how, a wingspan is when you hold your arms out to your sides like you're going to fly away. You measure from your fingertips on your first hand, the length of that arm across your chest, the length of your second arm, and to the fingertips on that arm. Then go ahead and thread that onto your beading needle, and let's get started. To start this project, we will first be making the bracelet with these little cubes. So it'll be the same process, however, I'll just change the size of my seed beads on the second one. So we're going to pick up one of these little cubes, and we're going to bring it down. Leave yourself about a 12-inch tail, or enough to extend, because we're going to have to put our clasp on. So once you've pulled some tail out of the bead, just hold it in place, and then you are going to pick up 3 8/0 seed beads. No, excuse me, an 8/0, an 11/0, and an 8/0. I'm sorry about that. So this is what you're going to pick up. Let me get you in a little bit closer. 8/0, 11/0, 8/0, and then you're going to go back through the bead. So just go into the bead, hold on to the bead and the tail, and then just pull these 3 beads down to your little cube, and you get something that looks like this. Then you are going to pick up another 8-0, 11-0, 8-0 onto your needle, like this, and you're going to go back up through. So as you come back up through, you can go ahead and come up through one of the 8-0s on the other side. It's going to get all messed up. Don't worry about that. Just hold on to it and then pull it into place. So you're going to have something that looks a little weird like this. Then pull on your tail a little bit and pull on your working thread, and it'll pull those little beads down nice and organized. Then we're going to have to sew through these beads, back through the cube and through these beads to secure this. So I'm coming out of this 8-0 here. I'm going to go through the 8-0 here. And then I'm going to go through the 8-0 here and the cube and up through the 8-0. I'm just going diagonal because my needle wants to go that way. So go across like that. Hold on to everything nice and tight, and then go into the 8-0 on the top here, or the 11-0, excuse me, on the top here. And pull through. As you can see, I'm holding with my finger and my thumb as I do this so that everything stays in place. Now I'm going to go into the 8-0 on this side, back up through the cube, diagonal, and into the 8-0 here. Now I am just going to sew into the 11-0 and into the 8-0 here. My little tail is coming out of the cube, so what I want to do is I just want to take it and put it up through one of these 8-0s just to get it in proper position and get it out of the way. So without a needle, you can just shove it up through one of those beads, and now it's not in the middle of your weave here. Pull everything, make sure it's nice and tight. You'll notice that one of your little beads will be a little bit over the edge of the cuboid. Now I do recommend that you use Tohos for this because they are bigger and the size of these beads matter in this particular weave. So what we're going to do now is we're going to pick up an 8-0 and an 11-0 onto our needle. We're coming out of the bottom of this bead here. We're going to go into the top of it, just like this, down towards the cube, and pull these 3 beads around. And then we're just going to sew back through them. So I'm coming up through this 8-0 and this 11-0 here. And then I'm going to go down through this cube, or this 8-0, excuse me, right next to the cube, this 8-0. Then I'm going to pick up a cube, and I'm going to go into the 8-0 on the other side of our cube that we've already put on our piece. So down into that, pull that cube down. You're going to have to push it into place and arrange it by pulling on your thread a little bit. Let's get you in just a little bit closer. Now, we're going to pick up an 11-0 and then an 8-0, and we're going to go back into the 8-0 on the previous unit. So we're working on this unit here, so this is the previous unit. We go into this 8-0 from the cube side, and then pull this down. Now, we have to sew through the 11-0 and the 8-0, through the cube and back up to this 8-0 here. So we're going to go through this 11-0, and I'm just holding on to it, and then I'm going to go through this 8-0 here, and then up through the cube and into the 8-0 here, right there. Now we're coming out of this 8-0. We're going to make our next unit by picking up an 11-0 and then an 8-0, and then we're going to go back through the 8-0 that we're coming out of on the opposite side from which we're coming out. So on the cube side, we're going to go up through this bead, just like this, and we're going to pull these beads down. Now we're going to go through this 11-0 and this 8-0 here. So go down or go into the 11-0, hold on to your piece, and then go into the 8-0. And then you're going to pick up a cube. And you're going to go down into this 8/0 here. So we have to just go into the very last 8/0 on the opposite side from which we're working and on the previous unit. And again, you have to kind of push it into place, pull on your thread a little bit, and then pick up an 11/0 and an 8/0 and go back into the 8/0 you're coming out of. Go into the opposite side. So from the cube side, I'm going to go into that bead and pull my 11/0 and 8/0 down. And then I'm just going to position my cube where I want it. I'm going to sew into this 11/0 here. Get my tail out of the way. Sorry, everybody. Go through the 11/0. Go into the 8/0 next to that 11/0 and up through the 8/0 on the opposite side here. And now we're going to pick up an 11/0 and an 8/0, and we're going to go into the bead we're coming out of from the cube side. So the opposite side of the bead we're coming out of. We're going to pull these down. And then we're going to sew through the 11/0 and the 8/0. So go through the 11/0 on top here. And then go through the 8/0. Make sure that you keep good tension on this. So as you can see, I hold on to it and I give a little tug. And that way everything has really nice tension. If you don't have good tension, you're going to have a loose, funky looking bracelet, and you don't want that. So now we're going to pick up a cube and we're going to go into the 8/0 on the opposite side from which we're working on the previous unit and go down through it from the cube side. And pull this cube into place, place it nice and neat next to the others, and then pick up an 11/0 and an 8/0 and go into the 8/0 that you're coming out of on the opposite side. Pull these down, give a little tiny tug, and then go through the 11/0 and go up through the 8/0 and up through the 8/0 on the other side. And then again, pick up an 11/0 and an 8/0 and go into the 8/0 you're coming out of on the opposite side. So you're going to make a little unit on top of each one, and this is our unit here. Then we're going to go through the 11/0. Then we're going to go through the 8/0. And then we are going to pick up a cube. And just kind of watch the colors you pick up. These are random, but you don't want to end up with all purples in one spot or all, unless you want to do it that way. That's up to you. But I'm just kind of picking them up randomly. So I've got my cube. I'm going to go down into the 8/0 on the opposite side. Place it in, give a little tug, and then pick up an 11/0 and an 8/0, and then go into the opposite side of the 8/0 I'm coming out of. Pull these down, go into the 11/0, go into the 8/0, and the 8/0 on the other side. Let's do one more and then we'll go to length, because this is very repetitive and this is all there is to it. Then when we come back, we can put our clasping on. So let's go ahead and pick up an 11/0 and an 8/0 and go into the 8/0 on the opposite side from which we're coming out. Pull this down, go through the 11/0, go through the 8/0, pick up a cube, go through the 8/0 on the other side in the previous unit, arrange your cube, pull it a little bit, get it tight, and then pick up an 11/0 and an 8/0 and go through the 8/0 you're coming out of from the opposite side. So through your 11-0 here. So through the 8-0, the cube, and the 8-0 on the other side, just like that. And you're just going to continue doing that until you have 44 cubes. So this is all contingent upon the length of bracelet you want, of course. So with 44 beads, you can see I have exactly 6 inches. So I am going to end up with about a 7-inch bracelet once I put on my clasping, maybe a little bit bigger. If you want to make a bigger bracelet, then you can go ahead and make it a 1/2 inch longer, whatever you want to. It doesn't have to be a specific number of cubes for this to work, so you can make it as long as you want. However, there are about 60 cubes in these particular strands, so you could probably make it, a good 2 inches bigger than I have. So this is what we have. Now let me show you. I'm coming out on this end. This is where I stopped, and you will see when you stop that your unit on the side that you've just come up through, so you did the side, you come up through your 8-0, as you've been doing all along, you will see that this unit is shorter than this one. It's incomplete. So what we need to do is we need to finish that unit. So we're going to pick up an 11-0 and an 8-0 onto our needle, and we're just going to go under this 8-0 here. So the very last one, and it's kind of tight, so give me a second here. Go underneath it, just like this, and pull these down. This will finish off your piece and make it a little bit more even. It's still, it wants to go over the side a little bit. So that's okay. We're going to go ahead and sew up through this 11-0 now. We're coming out of the 8-0 here. We're going to sew up through the 11-0. We're going to grab the 8-0 and we're going to anchor it on this side, and that way that'll pull that in a little bit and complete our unit. So we're going to go in through the cube, and then we're going to go into this 8-0 here. So if you can go straight across and get into that 8-0 at the same time, that's fine. If not, go through the cube, go into the 8-0 on the inside here, and then go up through the 11-0 and then into the 8-0 here. Now we are going to pick up 3 11-0 seed beads. Let's see, let's do 3 and an 8-0 and drop this down. So we're coming out of this 8-0 right here. We're going to drop this down, and then we're going to go through our clasping here. Then we're going to go just back into the 8-0 seed bead here, and I'm going to hold on to it, pull my thread through, and just draw it down to my beads here. Then I'm going to again pick up 3 11-0 seed beads, and I am going to go into this 8-0 here from the inside. So on the side of the cube, you're going to go into this, and we're going to have to do a lot of securing here because we don't want just this little 8-0 seed bead holding on our clasping. So what we're going to do, instead of just going through the cube and then coming back up, we're going to go through this 11-0 here on the top, right here, pull my thread through. Then we're going to go down into the 8-0 right next to that bead we're coming out of, the 11-0. So go down into this 8-0 and into the cube, just like this. Now I'm going to go into this cube and come out of just the cube because I can't get through those seed beads on the other side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go between these two here and go into this 8-0, and then I'm going to go up into this 11-0 and the 8-0 We're going to go around our clasping again. So we're going to go up into the 3 11-0s, the 8-0, and the clasp here, just like this, and pull this through. Then we're going to go around the clasping into the 8-0 and down into these 3 11-0s and the 8-0 they're attached to. And again, we're going to sew through this 11-0, this 8-0, and I can't get through. So when you can't get through, if you go where the beads part through your 8-0, you can get through pretty well. So I'm going to go through that 8-0, then I'm going to go through the cube in the middle here, and I'm just going to come out of the cube. I'm going to go where my beads part and go up through this 8-0 here, and I'm going to sew up through it one more time. Through the 11-0, through the 8-0, up into all 3 of these beads here, come on, and into my clasp. Then I'm going to go down into the 8-0 and the 3 11-0s here. And if you don't want to use a toggle, because this is going to add some length, my bracelet's probably going to be 7.5, maybe 8 now. If you don't want to, you can use whatever clasping you want. You can use a lobster claw, you can use whatever you want. You could even put a button on here or something if you would like. So then we're going to go through this 11-0. We're secure on this side. So we're going to go down into the 8-0 over here now. So instead of going down into this one, we're going to go into the next cube here. So I'm going straight over into the next cube through the 8-0, and then I'm going to come up through this 8-0 here, between the beads. You can get through it. And then there's a thread bridge right here between this 8-0 and this 11-0. So let me get you even closer so you can see what I'm doing. Right here, I'm coming out of this 8-0. There's 11-0 here. There's a thread bridge right in between. We're going to go under that thread bridge, make a loop, go through the loop, and then pull our thread down. Then we're just going to go up through that 11-0, go down through this 8-0 and the cube, go up through an 8-0, and again tie another one right between this 11-0 and 8-0. So go under it, pull a loop. Let me get in camera, sorry. Back off just a little bit. And go into that loop, and don't stab yourself like I just did, because that hurt. And then tie a knot, go into the next 11-0, and down into the next 8-0, and you can do this as much as you want. I'm just going to come out of this 8-0 here, and I am going to cut my thread off on this side, and I'm just going to leave a tag, and I am going to burn this tag down a little bit. I'm just getting my flame towards the bottom of my flame close, and I'm just letting it roll in. I'm not lighting it on fire, I'm just melting it, just like that with the heat. And then we're going to go to this side, and I want you to go ahead and put your needle on this side, and we'll be back and we'll put the clasping on this side. Okay, so make sure you're coming out of the 8-0 where you started your weave. We went ahead and put it through an 8-0. Make sure you're coming out of an 8-0, and as you can see, it is a little lopsided, just the nature of the stitch and the way that I did it. So what I recommend is we're not going to add more on this side, because if we do, we're going to be way over. So what I recommend is just to grab your needle and just move this outside bead over a little bit so that it's hanging over a little bit like this one. This one's going to be a little bit further out than this side, but It's just the nature of the stitch. Just make sure that you move your 8/0 over a little bit, because this will stretch out a little bit and you can get a little bit more length there on that 8/0. So now I'm coming out of this 8/0 seed bead. If you're coming out anywhere else in your unit, just sew up through until you're coming out of an 8/0 towards the cube. Then we're going to pick up 3 11/0 seed beads and an 8/0. And we're going to drop this down. Now, sometimes you'll need a little bit more length to go through your toggles, so you may need 2 8/0s here, but I think with the extension we're making, we should be fine. So I'm just going to put 1 8/0, and then I'm going to go through my clasping. And then I'm going to go back through the 8/0. And just the 8/0. Right here. I'm going to hold on to it, pull my clasping down to my beads, just like this. And then I am going to pick up 3 more 11/0 seed beads, and I'm going to go up through this 8/0 on this side, right here. And I'm going to pull these down, and then I'm going to go, I'm coming out of this 8/0 here, right here. I'm going to go into the 11/0, right above that 8/0, and pull this down. Then I'm going to go into the 8/0 next to the 11/0 I'm coming out of. Then I'm going to go into this cube right here. So it's centered a little bit more over this cube, but I want to go into this one. Now, if you think it's going to leave too much thread, it should slide up under there, but if it doesn't, you can go into the other one and sew back over if you want. We're just securing. So now I'm going to come through this cube, and then where the beads split, I'll go through the 8/0 on this side. Okay, let me rearrange. I can't do it. Okay, so now I'm going to try to go through where the beads split, come up through this 8/0. Come on, you. I know I can do it. I've done it before. There we go. Go up through this little 8/0. And then I'm going to go through the 11/0. And then I'm going to go up through the 8/0 and the clasping again. So we're doing just exactly the same thing we did on the other side. Go back down into the 8/0 and then go into the 3 11/0s on the other side. Make sure I didn't miss that 11/0. Then I'm going to go into this 8/0 here and the 11/0 above it. If I can, I can't. So I'll just go through the 8/0 here into this 11/0 and down into this 8/0. I'm going to go ahead and do that again, and then I am going to knot it off just like I showed you on the other side. Exactly the same thing. So go ahead and finish off this end, tie off, and we'll be back. Okay, so I have tied off and finished my bracelet, and I measured it, and it's exactly 7.5 inches, and it fits really, really nicely. Let me see if I can put it on here on camera, and I'll show you what it looks like. And the toggle works fine, so we did have enough with that extension to go through the toggle. Of course, that all depends on what toggle you're using too, but it worked out just fine, and this is what it looks like, and I think it's really, really pretty. It's just very unique and fun, and it feels good on. It has a nice substantial feel to it. Just a really nice bracelet, I think. And I hope you make one, because like I said, I do have some more of these in stock, and I can always get more if they sell out, but I do have some. So if you want to try it, you can come get some. And now I'm going to go ahead and show you how to make the same type of bracelet with these cuboids, and we're just going to use 11 seed beads this time. We're not going to use 8 We'll just use the 11 and it's the same stitch. It's just a little bit more difficult than doing this because the beads are smaller, of course. So we'll be back in a second and get started. Okay, for this version of the bracelet, we're going to be using a 4x4x4 cuboid. You can also use, as I mentioned earlier, a 4mm round fire polish bead. They're basically the same shape and they will work really well for this type of stitch. We're also going to be using some 15 so I lied when I said we're only using 11 We're going to use 15 and 11 I have a nickel Toho, and I have a galvanized permanent finish aluminum in my 15 So 11 15 and then we're going to use a small clasp because the profile of this bracelet is much smaller. You can use a small toggle. I do have some of these I will list if you're interested. If not, find a small toggle or use a lobster claw or something like that in your stash. And then with this one, I would recommend that you use a size 12 beading needle because we are using 15 and these beads are small, the stitch is tight, and you will be much better off with a size 12. You can continue using your 6-pound Fireline, or you can use 8 or 10-pound nanofill if you have some on hand. So go ahead and thread onto your needle a wingspan, and remember you will probably need to extend your Fireline during this process or your nanofill. So I'm going to move this back and we're going to go ahead and get started. This is much smaller to work with, so I'm going to get in pretty close so you can see what I'm doing here. And I'm going to pick up one of my cubes, and again I'm going to just bring it to about 12 inches from the end of the thread. I want to leave a long tail so that I can make my clasping at the end here. And then I'm going to pick up an 11 and then a 15 and then an 11 and I'm going to slide back through the cube. So right here, I'm just going to go right back through, holding on to my crystal, and I'm just going to pull, and I'm holding the tail too, and I'm just going to pull this down so that my beads lay on top of the crystal like this. I'm going to get you in even a little closer because these are really tiny. Then we're going to pick up another 11 a 15 and an 11 and we're going to go back up through the crystal, diagonal into the 8 on the other side. It's going to mess everything up. Don't worry about that. Just hold on to it, the crystal and the tail, and pull. You can feel them pull up against your beads. They're going to look all weird. You're going to pull on your tail, and then you're going to pull on your working thread until they lay correctly. And that's what they should look like. Now we're going to sew back through. So we're coming out of this 11 We're going to sew through the 15 here. Hold on to everything tight. Pull your thread through, go into the 11 go into the crystal, and go into the 11 diagonal on the other side, just like this. And then I'm going to hold on to it again, and then I will again go through the 15 on this side, the 11 diagonal through the crystal, into the 11 on the other side, like this. Pull it through. Then we're going to sew through this 15 here, then through this 11 here, and that will position us for our next stitch. However, this little tail thread is coming out of the cube, and it can get in your way as you work. So we are going to take the end and we're going to slide it up through this 11-0. Now you may need to put a needle on to do it. Sometimes you can slide it right up through, just like I did, and sometimes you have to put a needle on it. But I've just slid it through that 11-0, and now I can just reposition, get back to where my working thread is, and I'm coming out of this 11-0 right here. This is my working thread, and I am going to pick up an 11-0 first and then a 15-0, and I'm going to go back into the 11-0 I'm coming out of on the opposite side, just like this, and I'm going to pull this down. Get that tail out of the way there. Then I'm going to pick up a crystal, and I'm going to go into the 11-0 on the other side here, just like this, and pull this crystal down. Now it's not going to position properly. You have to push it up against the seed beads on the top and just position it the best you can, and then you're coming out of this 11-0 here. Now we are going to pick up 15-0 and an 11-0, and we're going to go back into the 11-0 we're coming out of from the crystal side. And this is what you should have. Now we're coming out of this 11-0. We need to sew over into the 15-0, into the 11-0, and through the crystal, and through the 11-0 on the other side, just like that. Now my tail is coming out of this 11-0 on the inside because I turned it funny, but we can always thread it back through. I'm just going to leave it where it is, but when it's time to put on my clasping, I'll put a needle on and I will sew through the 15-0 and the 11-0 and the cube, and I will show you that. But I'm just going to leave it where it's at, and then I'm going to continue working here. So now I'm coming out of this 11-0. I'm going to pick up a 15-0, and I'm going to pick up an 11-0, and then I'm going to go between the crystals and up through. This is the best way to get through these 11-0s. I'm coming back up through the 11-0 I'm coming out of on the opposite side. Pull this down, and it's made another little unit for me. Now I am going to go ahead and go into the 15-0. I'm coming out of this 11-0. I'm going to go into this 15-0 here. And then I am going to go into this 11-0. I'm going to go back into the crystal, and then into the 11-0 on the other side. Simply because that 11-0 is recessed and it's going to be difficult to put a cube on. So we're going to go back through that side, and then we're going to pick up a 15-0, and then we're going to pick up an 11-0, and we're going to go through the 11-0 we're coming out of. Again, go from the crystal side, position your needle between the beads a little bit so you can get through that 11-0 like this, and then just bring it down. It's hard for me to hold on to right now and show you in the camera well, so as we get a little bit more, it's easier to handle. Now that I've pulled these down, I just flip them over because they want to go in a weird position. Then I can go through this 15-0 and up through this 8-0 right here. Then I'm going to pick up a crystal and go through the 11-0 on the other side. Push it into place. And then I will pick up a 15-0, and I will pick up an 11-0, and I'm going to go back into the 11-0 that I'm coming out of. Always from the crystal side and somewhat between the crystals so that you can get through. Pull this little unit down, push it over, go through the 15-0, go through the 11-0 and the crystal and the 11-0 on the other side. Just like that. Then pick up a 15-0 and an 11-0. Go back through the 11-0 you're coming out of, between the crystals, like this. Pull this down, push it over, align everything, sew through the 15-0, sew through the 11-0, sew back up through the crystal, and into the 11-0 on the other side. Pick up a 15-0, pick up an 11-0, go into the 11-0 from the crystal side, somewhat between the beads. It can be difficult to position yourself, especially when you're trying to stay in camera. So I am going to be able to do this, I promise. Right there. And then I'm going to pull this through, push it over, just like that. Sew through the 15-0, sew through the 11-0, pick up a crystal, sew through the 11-0 on the other side, pick up a 15-0 and an 11-0 and go through the 11-0 you're coming out of on the opposite side from which you're coming out. Sew through the 15-0, sew through the 11-0 and the crystal and the 11-0 on the other side. Then pick up a 15-0 and an 11-0 and go through the 11-0 you're coming out of on the opposite side, just like this. Pull this down, go through the 15-0, go through the 11-0, and go through the crystal and the 11-0 on the other side. Pick up a 15-0. This one I'm doing a little bit more. I'm just going to keep showing you because you have to sew through the crystal a little bit more. So I'm just showing you so that you can get kind of a rhythm down. So we're coming out of the 11-0. We pick up a 15-0 and an 11-0. And then we go through the opposite side of the 11-0. And when they're a little bit recessed, they're a little bit more difficult, so you can kind of push it over if you need to and go up through it. Just like that. Straighten it out. Go through the 15-0. And then go through the 11-0. Grab a crystal. Go into the 11-0 on the other side. Position your crystal. Even if it doesn't look like it's going to lay perfectly, once you get your beads on, it will. So just lay it the best you can. Get it as straight as you can. And then pick up a 15-0 and an 11-0. Go through the 11-0 you're coming out of. Push it over. Sew through the 15-0. sew through the 11-0, go through the crystal and the 11-0 on the other side. One more here. We're going to pick up a 15-0, we're going to pick up an 11-0, we're going to go through the 11-0 we're coming out of on the opposite side. Pull this down, push it over, go through the 15-0, go through the 11-0, and go through the crystal, and up through the 11-0 on the other side. Even though it's a little bit sticking out, that doesn't mean it's time to pick up a crystal, because this one's recessed, so it will be difficult for you. So you have to sew up through the crystal, and then you can start at your next one, because this bead is sticking out a little bit more. Once you put your little unit on, you will be able to grab a hold of that bead better. So that's why we sew up through that crystal one more time at the end. So we're picking up a 15-0, and we're picking up an 11-0, and we're going to go through this crystal. I'm going to go towards where the two crystals are next to each other, up through that 11-0. That's the easiest way to get access. Push this down because it curls over. Push it down. Go through the 15-0. Go through the 11-0. And now you can see I can position my crystal in here because I have a little bit of an 11-0 sticking out. So once I place that, I can arrange it just the best I can. You just kind of set it there, and then you can pick up your 15-0 and your 11-0, go between the crystals, go back into that 11-0 that you're coming out of on the opposite side, push that down, and then go into the 15-0. Okay, come here. Go into the 15-0, and then go into the 11-0, the crystal, and the 11-0 on the other side. And you're just going to continue doing that. This one, it takes more crystals, it takes more time than the last one because it's such a smaller profile. So just continue making these units. If you need to, you can always back up and watch a few more times until you get a rhythm, and then continue until you have 45 crystals, or you are about an inch short of the length that you want. So I am here at 6.5 inches, and I want mine to be a little over a 7-inch, close to 7.5 inches. So I have gone to 6.5 inches, and I am using a smaller clasp. So I'm not going to get probably a full inch. So go about 3/4 of an inch short of what you want. And then we are coming out of the end here. And I did my last little stitch here after I put it on. I need to even out my stitch now. So what I'm going to do, you will see that you're kind of recessed back. What you're going to do is you are going to pick up, let me get my thread fixed here, a 15-0 and an 11-0. And we're just going to go back into the 11-0 we're coming out of. So I'm going to go in where the beads are split between them here and pull these two down. Then I'm going to sew through the 15-0 and then through the 11-0 here, and then I'm going to go back into the crystal. Actually, I'm just going to go through the crystal. So I'm going to push this 11-0 out of my way and just go through this crystal. Because this time, instead of anchoring in the seed beads for our clasping, we're going to anchor in the cube itself, just to make it a little bit stronger for the fact that these beads are smaller and the seed beads are smaller. We need a little bit more strength here. So I'm coming out of this crystal, and I'm going to pick up an 11-0 And I'm going to try it with just one and see what happens. I may have to rethink this, but I'm going to pick up an 11-0, and then I'm going to pick up another 11-0, and then I'm going to pick up a crystal. Actually, just one 11-0 and a crystal, and then an 11-0. Then I'm going to grab my clasp, and I'm going to go through my clasp and drop it down to my beads. And then I am going to go back through just this 11-0, well, actually through the 11-0 on top and the crystal, like this. And I'm going to pull this down. I did not go through the other 11-0, just the 11-0 and the crystal closest to the clasping here. Now I'm going to pick up another 11-0, and I'm going to go through the other side of the crystal. So I'm going in front of the seed beads here on my little frame, just going in front through that crystal, just like this. Pull this down, and this is what you have. Now we're going to sew through this again. So I'm coming out of the crystal. I'm going to go up into this 11-0. Excuse me, let me reposition here. Okay, so I'm coming out of the crystal. I'm going to go up into the 11-0 on this side and into the crystal, and then into the 11-0, and then into the clasp, just like this. Back off just a little and pull this through. Now I'm going to go back around into the 11-0, into the crystal, and into the 11-0 on this side. And then I'm going to go back into my crystal on my piece, push my seed beads aside, go into this crystal, and sew up through one more time. So I'll go up into this 11-0, into the crystal, the 11-0 on top of the crystal, and through my clasping, like this. Fumble fingers. And then I'm going to go in around the clasp, into the 11-0, into the crystal, into the 11-0 on this side, and then back into my main crystal. Pull this all down tight so that you don't have any weirdness looking, just like this. Now, we are going to, because I decided to use the cube, we're probably going to get an inch on our clasping. So you want to go an inch short of the length you want. And then we're going to go up into this 11-0 seed beads. So I'm coming out of this crystal here. I'm going up into the 11-0. And then between this 11-0 and 8, or between the 11-0 and 15-0, there's a little thread bridge. I'm going to go under it here. Pull my thread until I create a loop, go through the loop, and draw a tiny knot between those beads, and then I'm going to go up through the 15-0 here. Goodness sakes, Gina. Jeez. And then down into the 8-0 here and into the crystal. Pull this through. And then between the crystal and the 11-0 here, I'm going to try to tie a knot. I'd rather tie a knot down here than on my fringe end. So right in here, right between the 11-0 and the crystal, I've grabbed that thread bridge and I'm going to tie another knot. And then I'm going to go up into this 11-0, into the 15-0, down into the 11-0. So I'm just following my original thread path, and then I'm just going to come up through this crystal and in front of the fringe on the other side, or whatever you want to call that, your border, I don't know. And I'm just going to cut this real short, just like that. And that's what that looks like. Now we're going to put our needle on the other side, and you're going to do the clasping the exact same way we did on this side, on this side with your leftover tail, and then tie it off, do everything exactly the same, and we'll be back. Quick mention, this side actually does not have a very uneven end, so I'm coming directly out of my crystal here. So I'm just going to go ahead and put my clasping on. Now, if you're not coming out of your crystal, you don't have to add any seed beads if you're not uneven. Just go into your crystal and then start your clasping. Just a little quick tip. So I finished, and I want to show you what it looks like on. How pretty is that? That's really pretty. And I'll take it off and show you. Now, because I hadn't planned to put the crystal on, but because I did, and I do like the way that looks, my bracelet is just a little bit bigger than I wanted it to be for my wrist. However, let's see, it has turned out to be, because you'll always measure a toggle from the middle of the circle side. It's 7.5. My wrist is only 6.5 inches, sometimes a little under 6.5 inches, depending upon how much weight I've lost recently. But it's a little bit bigger than I want it to be. Right now, bracelets that are fitting me well are between 7.25 inches. But it's 7.5. Actually, a little bit long. No, it's right at 7.5. So keep that in mind. I went to about 6.5 inches, so you want to make sure that, or 6 3/4, something like that. So you want to make sure that you are 1 inch short of the bracelet you want when you do this. Of course, that depends upon the size of your clasping. I'm using small clasping. If you're using bigger clasping, you'll have to take that into consideration. So this is what we've made, and this is what we've made, and I think they're both really pretty. This one takes a little bit more patience, and as you can see, I had to make it a little longer because my clasping's smaller, and they're both just slightly too big for me. But I think that's because I've lost a few pounds lately. So it's, I'm making them the size I would normally make, and my wrist is just smaller. But this is what we've made today. And I'll get you a nice close up. And aren't those pretty? Both of them are really nice. And I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you give it a try. Bye-bye.